While he spoke, so profound was the stillness that one might have heard a pin drop upon the floor. In ceasing, he departed at once, and as abruptly as he had entered. Can I? Shall I describe my sensations? Must I say that I felt all the horrors of the damned? Most assuredly, I had but little time for reflection. Many hands roughly seized me upon the spot, and lights were immediately reprocured. A search ensued. In the lining of my sleeve were found all of the court cards essential to the écart. And in the pockets of my wrapper, a number of packs. Facsimiles, those used as our sittings, with the single exception that mine were of the species called technically arrondies, the honors being slightly convex at the ends, the lower cards slightly convex at the sides. In its disposition, the dupe who cuts, as customarily at the length of the pack, will invariably find that he cuts his antagonist in honor, while the gambler, cutting at the breadth, will as certainly cut nothing for his victim, which may count in the records of the game. Any burst of indignation upon this discovery would have affected me less than the silent contempt of the sarcastic composure with which it was received. "Mr. Wilson," said our host, stooping to remove from beneath his feet an exceedingly luxurious cloak of rare furs. "Mr. Wilson, this is your property." The weather was cold, and upon quitting my own room, I had thrown a cloak over my dressing wrapper, putting it off upon reaching the scene of the play. I presume it is supererogatory to seek here, I in the folds of the garment with a bitter smile, for any farther evidence of your skill. Indeed, we have had enough. You will see the necessity, I hope, of quitting Oxford, at all events, of quitting instantly my chambers. Abased, humbled to the dust as I then was, it is probable that I should have resented this galling language by immediate personal violence, had not my whole character been at the moment arrested by a fact of the most startling character. The cloak with which I had worn was of a rare description of fur. How rare, how extravagantly costly, I should not venture to say. Its fashion, too, was of my own fantastic invention, for I was fastidious to an absurd degree of coxcombry. And matters of this frivolous nature. When therefore Mr. Preston reached me that I had that which he had picked up upon the floor, and now near the folding of the doors of the apartment, it was with an astonishment nearly bordering upon terror that I had perceived my own already hanging on my arm, where I had no doubt unwittingly placed it, and that the one presented to me was but its exact counterpart in every, even the minutest possible particular. The singular being who had so disastrously exposed me had been muffled, I remembered, in a cloak, and none had been worn at all by any of the members of our party, with the exception of myself. Retaining some presence of mind, I took the one offered me by Preston, placed it unnoticed over my own, left the apartment with a resolute scowl of defiance, The next morning, ere dawn of day, I commenced a hurried journey from Oxford to the continent. In a perfect agony of horror and of shame, I fled in vain. My evil destiny pursued me as if in exultation. It proved, indeed, that the exercise of its mysterious dominion had as yet only begun. Scarcely had I set foot in Paris ere I had fresh evidence of the detestable interest taken by this Wilson in my concerns. Years flew while I experienced no relief. Villain at Rome, with how untimely, yet how spectral an officiousness stepped he in between me and my ambition? At Vienna, too, at Berlin, and at Moscow. Where in truth had I not bitter cause to curse him within my heart? From his inscrutable tyranny did I at length flee panic-stricken. As from a pestilence, and to the very ends of the earth I fled in vain, and again. In secret communion with my own spirit, would I demand the questions, who is he? Whence came he? And what are his objects? But no answer was there found. And now I scrutinized with a minute supervision I scrutinized with a minute scrutiny the forms and the methods and the leading traits of his impertinent supervision. But even here there was but very little upon which to base a conjecture. It was noticeable that, indeed, in no one of the multiplied instances in which he had of late crossed my path, had he so crossed it except to frustrate those schemes, or to disturb those actions which, if fully carried out, might have resulted in bitter mischief. Poor justification this, in truth, for an authority so imperiously assumed. More indemnity for natural rights of self-agency so pertinaciously, so insultingly denied. I have been forced to notice that my tormentor, for a very long period of time, while I scrupulously and with miraculous dexterity, maintaining his whim of an identity of peril with myself, had so contrived it, in the execution of his varied interference with my will, that I saw not, at any moment, the features of his face. Be Wilson what he might, this, at least, was the veriest of affection or folly. Could he for an instant have supposed that in my admonisher at Eton, in the destroyer of my honor at Oxford, in him who thwarted my ambition at Rome, my revenge at Paris, my passionate love in Naples, or would he falsely term my avarice in Egypt, that in this, my arch enemy and evil genius, I could fail to recognize the William Wilson of my schoolboy days, the namesake, the companion, the rival, the hated and dreaded rival at Dr. Bransby's? Impossible. But let me hasten to the last eventful scene of the drama. Thus far I had succumbed supinely to this imperious dominion. The sentiment of deep awe with which I had habitually regarded the elevated character, the majestic wisdom, the apparent omnipresence and omnipotence of Wilson, added to a feeling of even terror, with which certain other traits in his natures and assumptions inspired me operated hitherto, to impress me with an idea of my own utter weakness and helplessness, and to suggest an implicit, although bitterly reluctant, submission to his arbitrary will. But of late days I have given myself up entirely to wine and its maddening influence upon my hereditary temper rendered me more and more impatient and of control. I began to murmur, to hesitate, to resist. And it was only fancy which induced me to believe that with the increase of my own infirmness, that of my tormentor, underwent a proportional diminution. Be this as it may, I now began to feel that the inspiration of a burning hope, and at length nurtured in my secret thoughts a stern and desperate resolution. That I would no longer be enslaved